Chained Echoes is one of those games that I and maybe a lot of others overlooked. It released at the tail end of last year and it completely flew under my personal radar. What I experienced once I fired it up really threw me for a loop. Indie games tend to not really be my cup of tea, and I don't mean to put them in a corner here, but more often than not they seem to be more games that take inspired by to be just copying without too many of their own original ideas. The few that really do know the difference though are really interesting and really amazing games. Thankfully, Chained Echoes definitely falls into that later category. The opening of the game is really familiar for the RPG faithful. Our mother starts off by opening the curtains and telling us to wake up. It's something that immediately calls out to us as the opening to Chrono Trigger. It twists this on its head immediately to begin the game, but I had such a dumb smile on my face seeing this. The opening really says a lot about how the game's going to proceed with its inspirations. In fact, this is the first major point of praise I'll give Chained Echoes. If you've been playing RPGs for the better part of almost 3 decades now, like me, you'll catch a ton of amazing references to enjoy. Final Fantasy, Xenogears, Chrono, Star Ocean, Dragon Quest, and a lot more. They're all here in various forms to notice. These are things like events, gameplay mechanics, and so on. The variety here is just that amazing and interesting. Thankfully, Chained Echoes does enough of its own thing while poking the audience to notice its references. Exploration plays out on a 2D plane as we run around to talk to NPCs or do combat with enemies in predetermined locations. It's almost exactly like Chrono Trigger. The maps are quite large, but they're never exhausting to navigate, thankfully. Of course, there's plenty of items and more to collect along the way, too. One gripe I did have though is that it's kind of hard to navigate some of the areas with their climbable paths. A bit more obvious highlighting would have been really welcome here. Combat has some interesting stuff to it too. On the surface, it's just another turn-based RPG, but if you look closely there's a gauge at the top of the screen. The gauge goes up and down depending on what abilities you use, and keeping it in the sweet spot provides a lot of positive effects. There's also supers that can be done by your characters every so often. These can be attacks or buffs as well. In general, I'd say combat has some interesting mechanics and flow, but it's definitely missing something. Overall, Chained Echoes is a more subdued title visually, and it extends to the combat. Honestly, my least favorite part of the game was how unflashy the combat is. Even when you get those awesome sky armors or super attacks, combat still looks and lacks a lot of flair, despite it having some pretty good mechanics. Speaking of Xenogears, the sky armors in this game add a lot of interesting dimensions to both travel and combat once you get them. In combat, they offer really big, damaging attacks, especially against other large enemies, but the main meat of them comes with exploration. You have the ability to fly or float, which is pretty awesome. It encourages backtracking for those extra items and quests that you've been seeing and missing along the way, though it can be a little hard to know where you can land and take off from. Without spoiling anything, the story here was really deceptively deep and interesting, beyond anything I was actually expecting from the opening hours. What starts as a usual romp to stop a war, chase a magic MacGuffin, and a few bouts of betrayal, it turns into a story rife with world lore, character trauma, elder gods, and more. There can be a bit of tonal whiplash sometimes, leaving you wondering what the hell is actually happening, but if you stick with the story just a little bit longer, these hard left turns really turn around and connect to the story in really interesting, brilliant ways. It feels a bit insulting to say this, but this game honestly punches well above its weight class in storytelling, and honestly, it really nails it. The sprite work and music are well done in this game. The world and characters both have a consistent and perfectly attuned look. The little touches of animations also really sell events that I really enjoyed. I especially want to give a shout out to the boss sprites. They look amazing. And the music is well above what I was expecting too. I keep saying that, but this game really did punch above its weight class. There's a whole variety of upgrades here as well. Characters can earn abilities after every boss fight, which is really interesting. These can be direct attacks or passives. And after every fight, you get points. Using these points, you can upgrade your abilities. The system feels really nice because it always feels like you're pressing forward, which I really like. Then there's the weapons and armor upgrades. Honestly, I kind of hated this. It was a bit confusing all the way to the end, but basically all of the equipment can be upgraded with items. You can even add extra effects and stats this way. It all helps, but I felt like it was a bit too much in my opinion. The last thing I want to touch on is difficulty. Chained Echoes is a deceptively difficult game with enemies with large HP pools. Thankfully, the game lets you tailor the experience by toning them down a bit. Even though I toned them down on my personal playthrough, sometimes even basic enemies took a lot of turns to take down. Still though, once things got going and abilities got unlocked, I felt like it balanced out pretty well. In all, Chained Echoes is the kind of indie RPG that you simply must play. If you're at all a fan of the SNES to PS2 era of games, it's got your name written all over it. Its flaws are truly small compared to all of the good that it does. Being able to mash together so many parts of other RPG greats, but to still come out feeling fresh and unique, is an absolute win for this game and the genre. If you're at all interested or curious about this game, I 100% recommend Chained Echoes. Go out and play it. But that's going to do it for this review of Chained Echoes. That was a bit off the cuff without a real script or anything like that. I've been meaning to talk about this game for several months now, actually, since I started playing it. But let me know in the comments down below. Have you played Chained Echoes? Did you enjoy it? Do you like it? Are you curious about it? Let me know down below. Be sure to like, sub, hit the bell for notifications. Follow me on TikTok too, where I post clips of dumb stuff and some in real life Japan stuff as well. Hope to see you again next time, and good night, good game.